The biggest cost of living crisis for decades is hitting Brits, and most of it hasn't even started yet. As Rishi Sunak delivers his 2022 spring statement tomorrow, pleas are mounting to help the millions of Brits who could soon have to choose between food and fuel. Energy bills, national insurance and inflation are all surging in April, outstripping below-inflation benefit, pension and wage rises. Meanwhile, tax and student loan repayment thresholds are being frozen in a stealth tax squeeze on the cost of living. The Mirror understands officials are braced for inflation to peak above 8% this spring, with formal forecasts due to be produced tomorrow. Chancellor Rishi Sunak is considering cutting fuel duty by 5p a litre and is said to have looked at raising the national insurance threshold, to take some of the lowest-paid Brits out of the soon-to-be-hiked tax. But HES resisting any bigger action like axing the knee hike entirely, or raising pensions or benefits beyond 3.1%. Money-saving expert Martin Lewis warned on Sunday, "I am virtually out of tools to help people now, it's not something money management can fix. It's not something for those in the lowest incomes, telling them to cut their bills will work. We need political intervention. So as we wait for Tory Rishi Sunak to deliver any help, let's look at the biggest cost of living hikes he needs to deal with, and the dates they'll hit." Inflation. Date. Now. UK CPI inflation has already hit 5.5%, raising the cost of food, energy and transport rises at the fastest for 3 decades. The war between oil giant Russia and wheat-producing Ukraine is now making this worse, with officials now braced for inflation to peak above 8% in April. It will mean the same pound in your pocket buys you less in bread or fuel, and tightens business margins to the point where firms could go bust. The Resolution Foundation expects inflation to remain high for most of this year and still be above 7% in September, a level not seen since the early 1990s. Interest rates. Date. Now. Last week the Bank of England increased interest rates to 0.75%, despite warnings it would crush households already drowning in the cost of living crisis. The bank took the move to slow the economy down and cool soaring inflation above. Governor Andrew Bailey recently appealed to workers not to ask for big pay rises, as that fuels inflation further. But it will mean new mortgage rates become more expensive, and inflicts an overnight rise to monthly payments for people on standard variable rates. Petrol prices. Date. Now. Petrol prices have hit record highs due to Russia's war in Ukraine, leading Chancellor Rishi Sunak to hint he'll temporarily cut fuel duty. The average price of petrol reached 163.46p a litre while diesel rose to 173.44p a litre Sunday before last. A month earlier they averaged 148.02p and 151.57p a litre respectively. A family car with a typical 55-litre tank is now paying £89.90p to fill up compared to £68.57 a year earlier. But Labour warned even a rumoured 5p a litre cut would make a difference of only a couple of quid to a family tank. And Mr. Sunak would face pressure to make any cut permanent, despite Tories having frozen the duty for 11 years already while raising taxes on everything else, energy bills. Date. April 1. The energy price cap will increase to a record £1,971 a year for a typical household following soaring gas prices. Around 22 million Brits on variable tariffs will be hit with a £693 rise to the average annual bill overnight on April 1. Those on fixed tariffs will be hit by rises when their fixed rate period ends. A second hike that could be just as big or even worse is expected on October 1. Rishi Sunak has announced plans to help, which include people living in bands A to D getting £150 discount on their council tax in England, and a £200 rebate off energy bills in October. But Labour has branded him the loan shark chancellor, as the rebate is effectively a loan which will need to be repaid over 5 years. Tory MPs say he must go further, for instance by increasing the £150 discount or £200 loan, or delaying repayments. But he was reluctant to announce help before April 1. National insurance rise. Date, April 6. A £12 billion rise in national insurance will hit working people as the Treasury looks to cut COVID backlogs in the NHS and begin funding social care. Employees will pay 1.25p more in the pound on earnings above £9,880 a year, a rise from 12% to 13.25%. This earnings threshold has risen since last year, but only by 3.1% less than inflation. The Lib Dems brand this a stealth tax that makes Brits pay £45 more. Those supportive of Boris Johnson argue the levy is progressive as the wealthier pay more. But Tory backbenchers hostile to new taxes balk at the plans as the tax burden hits its highest in decades. While Rishi Sunak is unlikely to scrap the rise completely, there are claims he could change the earnings threshold, for instance, aligning it with income tax below. Income tax, stealth tax. Date, April 6. Rishi Sunak chose to freeze income tax thresholds at a time when inflation is climbing at frightening speed. You'll have to carry on paying 20% on earnings over £12,570, and 40% on earnings over £50,270 just like this year. According to the Commons Library, more than 1 million more people will be paying a higher rate of income tax by 2026. And that was analyzed before the latest rises in inflation. The IFS think tank now warns it's a £20.5 billion stealth tax, 2.5 times bigger than first thought. Real terms cuts to pay, including for NHS and teachers. Date, April 1. Inflation means many planned rises to public sector wages, which are due every April, will be wiped out by rising prices. At this rate, workers will need a rise of 7% to 8% just to keep up with rising prices, but the government is resisting these. Ministers have already spelt out plans to raise salaries for experienced teachers by only 3% in 2022-23. Health unions have also blasted plans to offer NHS staff in England a miserly 3% hike. The Royal College of Nursing is demanding 5% above inflation. Council tax rise. Date, April 1. Most of England's families will be hit with a council tax rise of 3% or more next Friday, Mirror research reveals. Of 151 councils that run social care, the Mirror found 89 were planning rises of 2.99%, the maximum normally allowed this year. And a further 39 planned rises higher than 2.99%, by using allowances that were unused in previous years. Now of course, most people's council tax will be lower than last year due to the £150 discount for Band AD homes in England. But there are two big catches. First, that £150 is meant to pay for energy bills, not absorbing the cost of a tax rise. In Rutland, a Band D bill will go up by £91, wiping out much of the £150 discount. Second, the £150 is a one-off. Next spring, you'll suddenly feel the force of not just this year's rise but also the April 2023 rise at the same time. COVID tests. Date, April 1st. From April 1st, the vast majority of people must pay if they want a COVID lateral flow test, even if they have a cough and fever. Number 10 has said spending £2 billion a month on free tests is not an effective use of taxpayers' money at this point. This prompted a furious row with Labour, some medics and the Scottish and Welsh governments. Asymptomatic tests for NHS workers will be made available but not routinely, only as a surge effort where there's an outbreak. But they will be available for care home residents. Exact lists of those eligible are being drawn up. Boots is preparing to charge £12 for a pack of 5. Student loans stealth tax. Date, April 6. Millions will be forced to pay more on their student loans under what has been branded as stealth tax rise. Student loan repayment thresholds will be frozen from April 6 after plans to raise them by 4.6% were scrapped. That means graduates will have to shell out more of their disposable income as wages and prices rise with inflation. The respected Institute for Fiscal Studies warned the freeze will cost £30,000 earners £113 a year more than they expected. IF's senior economist Ben Waltman said it was a further hit to real incomes, adding it effectively constitutes a tax rise by stealth on graduates with middling earnings. It gets worse further in the future. Students starting university next year will begin paying off their loans when they earn more than £25,000, down from the existing £27,295 a year threshold. And the length of time to repay the debt will be extended to 40 years, up from 30. The IF said this will leave poorer graduates paying £28,000 more over their lifetimes, real terms cut to welfare benefits. Date, April 11. Benefits will rise by 3.1%, as little as £10.07 a month on the rate of universal credit. Tory MPs pushed through the plans earlier this year, saying it was in line with inflation. But it's only in line with what inflation was last September, before prices began to soar at an alarming rate. Many are warning that this will severely exacerbate the cost of living crisis for those who are struggling the most, with food bank use climbing. The Resolution Foundation has urged Rishi Sunak to raise benefits more generously as an urgent priority, ahead of any decision to cancel the national insurance rise. Pensions are being cut in real terms, before rising next year. Date, April 11. Pensions could rise by more than 7% next April after the Tory DWP chief promised to bring back the triple lock, despite soaring inflation. Theresa Coffey suspended the triple lock, a solemn manifesto pledge, for 1 year in 2022-23 because post-COVID wages were bouncing back in an anomaly. That sparked fury as it meant the state pension will rise by only 3.1% next month, less than inflation. That is a real terms cut of £388 to Britain's 12 million pensioners, Shadow DWP chief John Ashworth said. But Ms. Coffey said the triple lock would return in 2023-24 as promised. That could lead to a rise of 7.2%, experts predict. A real terms cut to childcare help. Date, now. Poor parents will be hit hard by April's cost of living crisis as Tory ministers refuse to raise a crucial childcare allowance, despite soaring inflation. Parents on universal credit can claim back 85% of childcare costs, but only up to a £646.35 a month cap, which has not changed since 2016 and is not rising in April. Campaigner and working mum to a 4-year-old and Gemma Widowfield, 36, told MPs, "We're all in the midst of a cost of living crisis. We're all feeling the pinch. My childcare's going up slightly but the universal credit cap isn't going up at all, that's going to be passed on to us.